of the emails I got was from somebody who, their teacher, they're in a science class at, I presume, a high school somewhere. I haven't discussed ages or anything. And their science teacher explained evolution in a way that was very difficult for them to understand, or not really understand. It was very difficult for them to buy into. And when they, assuming their explanation of what their science teacher said is correct, I can completely understand, because the implication was that adaptive traits are something that is almost consciously or a willed act. Yeah. Essentially, the idea that whales evolved from some form of land mammal was portrayed by the teacher as there were these wolf-like creatures who spent so much time in the water that they gradually adapted to the water and then became whales, which is only true in a very, very vague and simplistic sense. It's not like they said, "Oh, I really like the water. I'm going to make sure that I, grow a tail or lose some of this hair, make it easier." It's evolution is simply change over time, and there's no direction, there's no end goal, there's no conscious motivation or will to become something else. Change happens, and those entities that are best adapted because of the change for the environment that they're living in at the time are actually the ones that are worst are selected against. And those that have the more beneficial traits reap the rewards of this. Mm-hmm. Now, but how does a wolf-like thing turn into a whale? Lots and lots and lots of time. That's the part that we're really bad about grasping, are these vast expanses of time, vast expanses of distance, etc. But this conversation got sidetracked because she kept wanting to make appeals to the Bible and Jesus and why she believes what she believes. And I said, it's fine that you believe this stuff. And she's like, well, I wouldn't think anybody would be able to make up this stuff about Jesus because somebody who was there would have said something. And I said, well, you do realize that there are no confirmed eyewitness accounts, she was only referring to the Gospels. Yeah. A lot of Christian, including Christian scholars, think that John may have actually been John the Apostle, and so was therefore possibly an eyewitness. But there's no confirmed eyewitness accounts in any of them. And she's like, well, what do you mean? Matthew was a disciple, and clearly he was an eyewitness. The book of Matthew wasn't written by Matthew. We don't know who, well, I can't say it wasn't written by. There's no good reason to think it was, and there are plenty of good reasons to think that it wasn't. The book is actually anonymous. We don't have any of the early, oh, by the way, I'll just save us time. This is a Bible, the NIV. Don't have to listen to an atheist. If you have a decent Bible that has extra information besides just, the red letter stuff, the NIV happens to contain a little discussion about the Synoptic Gospel, but Matthew, right here, really, this is the introductory page before the book actually starts. On the authorship, it says, although the first Gospel is anonymous, the early church fathers were unanimous in holding that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles, was its author. However, the results of modern critical studies, in particular those that stress Matthew's alleged dependence on Mark for a substantial part of his gospel, have caused some biblical scholars to abandon Matthean authorship. Why, they ask, would Matthew, an eyewitness to the events of the Lord's life, depend so heavily on Mark's account? The best answer seems to be that he agreed with it and wanted to show that the apostolic testimony to Christ was not divided. I happen to disagree with what they think the best explanation is. When you have word-for-word copying between the Gospels, I don't think the best explanation is, he got it right, so I'll just copy his stuff. I think that when you have a bunch of anonymous books that are written decades, if not further, from the events that they purport to describe, that you are on incredibly shaky ground to say, well, Jesus said this. Okay, first of all, outside of the Bible, there's no confirmable evidence that there was a Jesus. I'm not claiming that there wasn't. I'm just saying that all those neat little events from his life aren't recorded anywhere other than the Bible. by any contemporaries. I mean, sure, a century or so later, somebody would say, "Oh, this happened," but I mean, where's the account of the birth, the crucifixion, the trial, the healing, the walking on water, the speaking to crowds, the various miracle accounts? Where's the extra biblical account of Matthew's claims that Herod killed all the firstborns? Where's the extra biblical account of the zombies during the day of crucifixion that rose up and walked into Jerusalem? That's kind of something you'd think somebody would report. If a bunch of dead people climbed up out of their graves and marched into town, boy, it's odd that that's not there.
Yeah.
And when you add all this together, at a minimum, no matter whether you're a Christian or not, at a minimum you have to admit, if you're honest, that this is not a book that you should dogmatically assert as true. At a minimum, you have to go that far. And if you don't, I don't know what to say. She was of the opinion that, hey, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Well, how convenient that most Christians seem to have that kind of perception, despite the fact that in most Bibles, and a casual search on who wrote the Bible will demonstrate that there's a lot more questions than answers. The problem is that if the churches made this common knowledge, it's not like they're going out of their way to hide it. The information's there. But if they stood up on Sunday morning and said, now we are not sure who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, but we're assuming that it might have been the Apostle Matthew because of its particular Jewish slant, and here's a potential eyewitness. People in the pews would go, huh? And that's I think one of the problems that we end up facing. I'm not going to go into details on arguments for Jesus' historicity or anything else. All I'm saying is that if you come from this point of view that this book is the infallible or nearly infallible, God-breathed scripture of a higher power, and that you have a good rational justification for this, that there's evidence to support the reliability of what's in here, you're simply wrong. It's fine for you to accept it, and it's fine for you to accept it on faith if that's what you're comfortable with. But to assert that you have a rational justification for this, it's simply false.